Hello, this training will review the data protection and transparency elements of Education Law 2D. These requirements are also found in Greece Central School District's Board of Education Policy 5671. And here's a pro tip, if you're ever finding it hard to sleep, you might want to pull out this policy because it's 14 pages long. It's probably one of our longest Board of Education policies. It's required by Ed Law 2D because it outlines in specific how we will implement the data protection and transparency requirements. I won't read 14 pages to you. I'll summarize that the data protection pieces fall into these 6 categories. Number 1, we're going to protect personal identifiable information, which is basically any piece of data or collection of pieces of data, like a person's name and maybe their phone number, that would reasonably identify who a person is. It's really important we protect that. Identity theft is a real threat to everyone, even children. Being able to steal the identity of a child is very valuable to identity thieves because they can use it undetected for many years. And also the personal identifiable information of a student's grades or an adult's financial records. We know that personal identifiable information needs to be protected. The NIST cybersecurity framework is a very important paradigm. It's a set of standards from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, basically into 5 big buckets. Identify the data you have, protect it, detect if there's any unauthorized access, respond to that unauthorized access should it occur, and recover that data. And those 5 objectives have a good number of best practices and what they call controls, such as encrypting data and using 2-factor authentication and using strong passwords and using important least access procedures. And we implement those in the district according to Education Law 2D. We must have parent complaint procedures in place to help parents should they have concern about the data that's being collected, or if there's inaccuracies in the data, or if it's been leaked. Third-party contracts is a big one. We'll come back to that for any company that holds student or staff data. We must have a data security and privacy policy in operation, which is exactly what this 5671 is. And we must have annual employee training, and more on that in a minute. And then for transparency, we must have a very clear, posted, easy-to-read Bill of Rights for parents that also includes incident reporting and notification procedures. And finally, we need a data protection officer in each district appointed by the Board of Ed who reports back to the board yearly on these matters and oversees this implementation of Ed Law 2D. Currently, the Greece board appointed DPO is myself, Tom Mariano. So real quick, the annual training that you have to go through should include 3 different elements. One is Ed Law 2D says to make you familiar with state and federal laws, which many people did in the fall, including FERPA laws and HIPAA laws, and also COPA, which is the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, which is particularly to protect children under 13 years of age from having personal information collected online is an important one. And CIPA, which is the Child Internet Protection Act, which is one to protect them from online predators. District procedures about how we protect data, which is what you're going through right now, and security awareness, which you did a little bit in the fall about malware and phishing attempts to get into your accounts. Now, this incident reporting and notification that was mentioned earlier, we have to notify impacted families and staff if we detect a breach, or no more than 60 days after discovering that, and it has to include this kind of information, as well as a contact person to assist them. And that parents' Bill of Rights needs to be posted with not only their rights, but supplemental information about what vendors may have and how they may protect data. I'm going to start showing you that right now because it has to be posted on our district website. It's found on our website under the Our District section under Required Postings. So let's go there. Our District, Required Postings. go down to Parents' Bill of Rights. So here you will find the 5 major elements of our Bill of Rights. Number 1, that a student's PII will not be sold or released for any commercial purposes. In accordance with FERPA, that a parent can also have the right to review and inspect their child's educational record. That the district will follow safeguards to protect student data. This is a big piece of the NIST framework, different ways to protect. And it's about technological safeguards as well as student information only accessible by those who are deemed warranted of having information. This is why we are very careful about only giving accounts to people that need that account or that kind of access that they are warranted by their job position. And this one, number 4, is that the New York State Education Department itself collects a number of data elements based on the APPR system and the state assessment system and some HR functions. And this link takes you to their master list. It's quite a large list, I think 13 pages, and lots of data elements, the description of what they are and why they collect them. You may want to spend some time on this. There's lots of data here that the state collects, and it's our obligation to help them communicate that data. And finally, that assurance to parents that they have the right to submit complaints about breaches of student or teacher or principal APPR data and how they submit it, and that we must respond to it in a timely manner. And here's where they would send that complaint. It also mentions supplemental information, and that's related to the third-party contract, which means anytime we use another company to hold our data, whether it's WinCap or Infinite Campus or BusHive or even something small like SchoolPace or myfunmathgames.com, anything that might take personal identifiable information, whether we pay for it or whether it's free, we must have a third-party contract, a contract that is signed by the district. An individual does not have the right to click one of those agreements, just one of those, you read all that, or you don't read it, but you just scroll through the gobbledygook and click the I agree. You do not have the right to do that on behalf of the district with PII of students or staff. Instead, we must take the time to get a written third-party agreement and make that agreement public. The agreement must follow these 4 blue categories. The first is that we must have a data confidentiality maintenance agreement to make sure that that company is following the lawful policies and following our policies. We must also ensure that that company has a data security and privacy plan and that they actually follow recognize our Bill of Rights and that they train their subcontractors. They also must provide the supplemental information such as why do they have our data? What are they doing with it? How will they dispose it when it's not needed any longer? How will they correct it and make sure it's accurate? How will they encrypt it so it can't be intercepted by other unlawful accessors? And then also, where do they keep the data? And finally, how do they follow these other laws, which again include that NIST framework of what data do they collect, how do they protect it, how do they detect if it's breached, how would they respond, how would they recover. So all of these things have to be settled before even a free service gets our data. So the question becomes, well, which companies, which contractors do we already have approved? Well, we've worked that all out, and it's on our staff website under GCSD.org staff technology. So if we go there, under staff technology, you see here, right, the approved websites or software digital resources that have PII, personally identifiable information. This will take you to a spreadsheet listing the titles alphabetically with the status of whether they're approved. And then if you go down a little further, you'll see some that are not approved. The ones that are not approved is we do not have a contract with them, or a supervisor has decided that that's not a company we're going to pursue because it's a redundant piece of software or something that's been decided we're not going to use. So there are some down here that are not approved. Some that are pending. We've been waiting for the company to sign the contract, but they're not, and therefore we cannot use them. But for the ones that are approved, it means that we have a contract either signed with us or signed for us with BOCES. And those are the only two acceptable possibilities to use something that contains that personal identifiable information. So if I were to click into Book Creator as an example, the transparency rules of Education Law 2D require that we make these contracts accessible to be visible. So I chose Book Creator. Here's Book Creator. You can read here on one of your nights of insomnia how we have an agreement with Book Creator that they will follow the NIST standards again, how they have their subcontractors following rules, how they will limit access to our data, how they recognize our Bill of Rights, how they will get rid of the data when we're done using it, and they have signed and agreed to that. So it's not a click-through agreement. It's not done by any individual. It's done by the district, and that's the only way that any software with personally identifiable information in it can be used. So that begs the question, what do I do if I want to use software that is not on this list? Also here, if you read on a little bit, there is this district resource request process, which will take you to that answer to that question. And it tells you here to use this interactive guide to determine if a resource you're interested in is already approved or needs approval. So the first question is the resource you wish to use on the approved list? You go to that list that we were just, and let's say it's not on there. And then it asks, does it use advertising or purchases or have any of these PII elements? And let's say I am very certain it does not. Well, then you'll be told, then you can use this with caution. Just be aware, and it gives you some things to be careful about because websites do change, and to proceed with caution, and you're set. But let's say that it's not on the list and you're not sure. This is something we would work with you to look at it carefully first. You don't want to find out later that you were incorrect about that. We want to have your back. And then finally, let's say it's not on the list and it does have some of this. Oh, it does ask them for their email address. It does ask them something about their name. Well, then we would say stop. And if you really want to use it, you're not authorized to do it yet. Fill out this form. This form will ask you some questions. It will send it to a supervisor to review its content to see if it's really a good site to consider. If they say it's a good site to consider, we will then reach out to the company to try to get one of these contracts that complies with this, and we will get back to you. This is not a quick process, unfortunately, but it is required by Ed Law 2D, and we really have to insist that everyone follows this. It's required by Education Law 2D. It is required by Greece Board of Education Policy 5671. So, in summary, we have the third-party contracts required for free or paid, anything that requires personally identifiable information. We have the Parents' Bill of Rights that includes that supplemental information as well as their rights for incidents that are to be reported, as well as the idea that they have rights to know how their data is being protected. We are also obligated to have a policy in place and annual training and follow the NIST security framework of identifying, protecting, detecting, and responding and recovering any data. And this is a job that we're all involved in together, so we appreciate the extra efforts that people have to put into to protect our data. So thank you for listening, and now you can go on to your quiz.